As I said in my last video, two really big things happened last week, and today again is June 25th. One of them was that the battle for Severodonetsk essentially ended with Ukrainian troop withdrawals. The other is that the European Union met and granted Ukraine candidate status. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video is Ukraine as an EU candidate and why that matters. So first, I'll say a little bit about what it doesn't mean, then what it does mean, and why I think it's so important. And I tend to be pretty cynical about things, but I think this is an area in which people might actually have underestimated the importance of this move. So first, what does EU candidate status mean? It does not mean that Ukraine is now a member of the EU or that it's a junior member of the EU. What it means is that the EU has said Ukraine can begin a path that, if everything goes well, can lead to the result sometime down the road of Ukraine being an EU member. And so just to start by throwing a little bit of cold water on any excitement, I would point out that Turkey, for example, has been an EU candidate since, if I'm not mistaken, 1987. I might be wrong about the year, but the point is it's been a long time. It's been decades that Turkey's been a candidate, and yet it's never progressed beyond that. And actually in 2016, they sort of suspended those conversations, largely due to human rights issues in Turkey. So there is no commitment at this point that Ukraine will become an EU member. There is no timetable for Ukraine to become an EU member. They're simply the beginning of a process, which helps then explain or answer one question, which is why would the EU do this at this point? Why would you admit a candidate that's in the middle of a war with Russia? And part of it is because the EU is not committing to anything. So there's a big impetus to do this. Ukraine has said since this war began, basically, we've long wanted to be a member of the European Union. Look at the price that we're paying in order to defend Europe from Russia. Look at the price we're paying in order to defend our own democracy. Surely, if anybody deserves to be a member of the European Union, it's us. For decades, the European Union and I should say since the 1990s, the EU and Ukraine have done this dance in which the Europeans have said, you're not democratic enough, you're too corrupt, you're too big, we can't really talk about this. And the Ukrainians have said, well, we can't really reform because the European Union isn't really putting anything on the table in terms of saying if you do reform, we'll let you in. And so there was this kind of dysfunctional relationship where they were both able to blame the other one for not making any progress. And that's kind of been, that impasse has sort of been broken, largely due to the bravery with which the Ukrainians fought, Europe's outrage at what Russia has been doing, and the Europeans' desire to be seen to do something regarding Ukraine. And the Europeans are really good at doing things that kick all the difficult questions down the road. And in a way, this does kick all the difficult questions down the road. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the European Union can always just defer any further steps on Ukraine becoming an EU member. So as I said, they haven't committed to anything. So why do I think this is so important? I think it's so important because this is one of these instances where the journey is the destination. The European Union, over the years since the end of communism in Eastern Europe, has been an incredibly powerful force in leveraging reform in its potential members. And we saw this in countries like the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, and others. Slovakia was a particularly interesting case where they were sliding towards authoritarianism. This is in the late 1990s. And the Slovakian elite basically got together and said, we've got to shove this leader, the guy's name was Mečiar, shove him out of power because he is endangering our path towards European Union membership. So the important thing about this path towards membership, on one hand, is it creates these incentives. It changes the incentives for reform domestically, politically. It allows reformers to say, right, rather than just saying we have to take this tough medicine and maybe sometime down the road it'll yield economic or political benefits. It allows them to say, we have to take this tough medicine because if we don't, our path towards the European Union is endangered. And that, in case after case after case, has tended to swing decisions that might have gone against reform in favor of reform. So it's incredibly important in sort of changing the balance of forces in promoting reform in the countries. The second half of it is the technical assistance that's given by the European Union. The European Union, of course, has thousands or hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats that are very good at these technical aspects of reform. And again, they've had success all across Central and Eastern Europe. You know, it hasn't worked so well everywhere, and there has been some backsliding, particularly in the case of Hungary. But overall, the record has been one of smashing success. And so what Ukraine will have, especially at some point if after this war ends, is a changed domestic context for reform, both because of the war and because of this candidate membership status, and some of the best, most meticulous professionals in the world, right, helping at the technical level, saying, no, you do things this way, you don't do things that way. So that's what potentially is on the cards now. Now, even in the best of circumstances, this will be a very long process. Some of the other candidate members in the Balkan region, you know, they've been candidate members for several years. To me, that's not a bug; it's a feature. And the Ukrainians had asked for sort of an expedited path to membership. And my opinion is that an expedited path to membership is not good for Ukraine, because what Ukraine needs and should want is really to be forced to go through that very difficult, meticulous process of reform. And that if they're able to get into the European Union by some shortcut route without going through all the reform, they'll actually have not gotten all the benefits from it. By the same token, if Ukraine does much of the reform needed to get into the European Union, and sometime 10 or 15 years down the road, the Europeans say, you know, we, for some political reason, we're not going to do it, Ukraine will still have benefited immensely from the reform. So this, to me, is a no-lose situation for Ukraine, though I'm not sure the Ukrainian government necessarily sees it that way. They want membership status as soon as possible, because the benefits of membership, of course, are immense, especially economically. It will be a long and torturous path, right? There is this body of European Union law known as the Acquis Communautaire, which is in multiple chapters and I think probably thousands of pages of rules and regulations and procedures and so on and so forth. And this is what makes people around Europe sometimes very frustrated with the European Union, is the level of bureaucratization involved and the level of sort of almost dictation you get from Brussels, right? These rules have been passed, and new membership, you take them or leave them. In the case of Ukraine, the good in that process will far outweigh the bad. Is everything the European Union does smart? Is all of it good? No. Is some of it way too over-bureaucratized? Yes. But given where Ukraine is starting from, I think this will be a massive, massive benefit to Ukraine. It's also the case that in the short term, in the immediate term, like this week, this month, it's an enormous vote of confidence in the Ukrainian government and in Ukraine as a country and as a society. And I think the timing in that respect couldn't have been better. This war is turning into a war of attrition. There's a sense in Ukraine, I think an accurate sense, that the rest of the world is beginning to lose interest. And so for the European Union to give this vote of confidence in Ukraine at this time and to sort of hold out, here's what you can be fighting for, here's what you can get sometime in the future, I think that's incredibly important. Again, even if it's a very long road ahead with no absolute guarantee of success. I'd be curious to know, just as one maybe final word, exactly how they feel about it in Moscow. The Russians have tended to say the right things, which is, this is a matter for the European Union to decide. It's none of our business. But of course, when it comes to Ukraine, Russia tends to think everything is its business. And so one interesting question is, does this make them more determined to win this war so that Ukraine can't become a member of the European Union? or is it a sign to Russia that the European Union is really serious about sticking with this, and and maybe if Russia wants a good relationship with the European Union in the future, it needs to think differently about things. I have to say I don't see that happening. I think Putin is quite comfortable now with the idea that Russia is going to be completely apart from Europe and in an antagonistic relationship with Europe, but nonetheless, we'll see. So big picture, nothing changes immediately, except it's a huge political boost for Ukraine and for the Ukrainian government. But in the long term, this can be, I think, an absolutely crucial watershed in Ukrainian history.